All right, we are live. I'm Mitchell Stokes. I'm the owner and head coach of Fluid Fitness Solutions. We're here to discuss cross-training for military and law enforcement, first responders, also known as a tactical athlete. Whoever's on, can we get a confirmation sounds coming through? I hate you guys to lose or miss content because the microphone isn't working. Just double checking. All right, sounds good. All right. So just to first start off my background, I did serve in the military. I spent some time in the Navy. I've trained other individuals to go to special programs, whether it be BUDS, search and rescue swimming, or just to get through basic training. They've come for me for help. So we're just going to go over a few main points, some things that I see going on wrong. And it's not particularly anything coming from the organizations themselves. It's just people focus too much on passing tests, and you see this in the education system, and not enough on actually doing the job and training for the actual job that they have to complete. A very good example is the PFT or your PST to get into the military, your entry-level physical readiness test to get into the military or get into a law enforcement job. Typically consists of push-ups, sit-ups, a run. Maybe if you're talking the Marine Corps or a special program, special forces program, they'll look at a swim or pull-ups, but that's about it. Now, someone looks at that and they say, well, I got to score really high on that PT test to be able to get a spot in that school. What they do is they focus on those modalities of training. They'll run 50 miles a week to get better at the run. They'll swim. Sometimes they don't, even though they should be. They'll be doing push-ups, sit-ups, and maybe pull-ups. Probably not, though. They're probably going to be mainly focusing on getting as many push-ups as possible in 2 minutes, as many sit-ups as possible in 2 minutes, and doing a 1.5 mile to 3 mile run, depending on their service branch or whatever program they're entering. The problem with this is it's not setting them up for success when it comes to actually passing the school. Just from my background, my experiences in the Naval Special Warfare community as a BUDS candidate, large across the board, what we saw is people that were physically capable of passing the test and doing well on the test for entry level. But once they were in the training program, it was a completely different story. They weren't strong enough to keep up with class. They couldn't pick up the heavy log over their head without dislocating their shoulder. They couldn't get over the obstacles on the obstacle course because they didn't have enough upper body strength. They didn't do enough work there. They may have done really well with a 500-meter swim, but it came time to do a 2-mile ocean swim out in the open ocean. They're very ill-equipped. They never swam with fins before. Their hip flexors were on fire. A lot of them pop smoke, inflate their vests and say, oh, I can't do this, pass out. Maybe they get hypothermia because they're out in the water so long. A lot of people are very ill-equipped and ill-prepared to go through some of these training programs because they go to the recruiting station and they're told, this is the standard, this is what you need to meet. And that's all they focus on is that minimum standard to get into training, to get into the school. Be the same as if all I did was study for the SAT for 4 years, I would be really good at taking the SATs, but I really wouldn't be that educated or really even good at thinking for myself, using objective reasoning. There's a lot of things that go into public education and private education where you're learning how to think for yourself, you're learning how to analyze, digest information and material that you're not going to get from studying for a specific test over and over and over again. A lot of these candidates, what they did is every day they took the test, or they would take it once a week. Maybe they would go for a run, swim throughout the week. They would do a lot of push-ups, a lot of sit-ups, maybe some flutter kicks, out the door. When it came time to training, the body just wasn't strong enough to handle it. They were prone to stress fractures, prone to labral tears, joint dislocations. They just weren't sturdy enough to handle 6 to 9 months of grueling school. The training is really rough. A lot of times you're carrying weight on your body, whether you're carrying a boat or along the first phase, carrying another person. Buddy carries, bear crawls in the sand runs. You're talking miles of lunges, literally miles of lunges with a log, carrying it overhead, carrying the boat overhead to second phase, a lot of time in the water, arguably just as hard, if not harder than first phase. Third phase, you're running around with a rucksack. You have a weight on your back, and you're expected to do pull-ups for chow, meaning every mealtime, there's a pull-up outside the pull-up bar outside the chow hall. You're expected to do 10 pull-ups with that weight on your back. Now, if all you're doing is push-ups and sit-ups and flutter kicks and going for runs several times a week, you're not going to have the upper body strength to be able to do that, especially several times throughout the day, throughout the week. So what we're going to talk about to start off is just some things that we can do to mitigate some of the problems here that we see across the board with these candidates. And I'm not just talking about buds or military. This goes into law enforcement as well. Let's talk about running. I come from an endurance background. I was a cross-country and track runner when I was in high school. I also ran a lot competitively when I was out of high school and out of the Navy. I still did half marathons and 5Ks and 10Ks on a regular basis. One of the things that my coach was really good at and instilled in me was variation. Variation of intensity, variation of volume. You can't just run 9 miles to 12 miles a day expecting to get better. You're going to get very good at running 9 to 10 miles at a specific pace. Now, if you're looking to get better at a 1.5 mile or 3 mile time run, or just to become a stronger runner in general, what you need to do is you need to do interval training, whether that consists of fartlek runs, sprints, hill work where you're doing repeats up a hill, distance runs, repeats where you're doing an 800-meter repeat. Let's say we do 8 800-meter repeats, 2 to 3 minute rest between each set. Your goal is to maintain intensity. Those are the things that are going to work at different capacities in your running game. That's going to make you a stronger runner, so that when it comes time to taking a 1.5 mile test, you can run it faster because you're a faster athlete now. You have a better base of fitness because you have those distance runs in as well. You have a nice base of volume. Doing a 1.5 mile run is not going to kill you. In fact, you're going to be able to do that and say, okay, the warm-up's over, what's next? A lot of times when candidates take these tests, we have to take it within a 2-hour span. So you're not just doing a 1.5 mile time run and then the next day doing some pull-ups. You're doing your pull-ups, your sit-ups, your push-ups, your swim, and your run all in one sitting. You get very little break, if at all. Pretty much just to change and get ready for the next station, for the next part of the test. So generally, what we look at for endurance athletes or someone who's looking to get better at endurance is, how bad are you at the run? If you're a stick figure 150-pound, 5'11", and you're already running a sub 6-minute mile, you're looking at a 5:30 mile, you really don't need to be focusing so much energy on your endurance, specifically your running. What's more likely the problem is you probably can't pick up a 200-pound male, sling him on your back, and run up the sand dune repetitively, like you're going to have to in a lot of these circumstances throughout these trainings. And not only that, but when you get to your job and something does happen, you're in a combat situation, people want to know that you're reliable. You're able to pick up that person, that down person that's injured or wounded, pick them up, take them to safety. Not to mention they have all their gear on. You're talking anywhere between 40 to 60 pounds a year between their body armor, their magazines, kit, their rifle, any additional equipment on their back. Let's say if it's a radio guy, you have your comms man with you. If he's down, that's a lot of equipment to carry. Same thing with your medic. Your combat medic carries a lot on them. If they are down, if they're wounded, and you can't pick them up, you're of very little use to your unit. So, looking at your strength and weakness, how bad are you at running? Are you really that bad? No, you're actually a pretty exceptional runner. You're too specific. You're too specialized in that arena. You need to vary it a little bit. You probably could do well with some strength training, whether it be deadlifts, back squats once or twice a week. Some strength training is going to it's going to help your running, but it's also going to help your other capacities, like I mentioned before, picking heavy logs up, heavy boats, picking up another person, doing dummy drags. If you're in law enforcement, most of the entry-level tests get some kind of obstacle course, timed obstacle course, and usually there's a dummy drag in there somewhere where you have to grab a dummy and drag it across to a certain set distance in a certain amount of time, usually toward the tail end of that circuit. If you're not able to pick a 200-pound dummy and drag it, you're not going to be able to pass the test, for one. You're not going to be able to finish the academy. You need to be able to do those things. Another thing is, with the running, a lot of people, and I see this in coaches, I see this in parents, when they have a child that's developing as an athlete, they think more is better. More is not always better. And in fact, it's very easy to overtrain when it comes to running or high-impact exercises. Typically what you see is a lot of stress fractures. I myself, when I showed up to Buds, I was over-prepared because I was an endurance athlete. I felt the need to go run around in boots for 5 to 8 miles, 10 miles in the sitting because I was under the impression I was going to be running all the time. That is partially true. There are times where we're running. It is a known fact that we run the chow. It's 1.5 miles to chow and 1.5 miles back. That's 3 times a day, plus any other extra running you're doing, any swimming. But it's at a dull roar. You're moving at such a slow pace in a pack with the rest of the class with anywhere from 50 to 150 guys. It's called the Buds Shuffle for a reason. You're literally shuffling down the street. Me running 50 miles a week is not going to help matters there. It's actually going to make it worse because I'm going to be putting a lot of damage on my knees, on my back, on my legs in general. What happened to me is I ended up with stress fractures before I even showed up. They only got worse while I was there. I was overtrained for it. My saving grace was I had some strength. I had some physical strength, luckily, because I did some weight training leading up into that school against my recruiters. And most people at the time, this is back in 2003 to 2004, the general consensus was, well, you should be lifting weights because you're going to get too heavy. You won't be able to run. You won't be able to swim very fast. You'll be kind of slow. You'll be all muscle bound. So just do calisthenics all the time. And I listened to that to a degree. Luckily, I ended up in my A school, my MOS training out in Virginia Beach in Dam Neck. There were a couple of guys, a handful of guys I was rooming with. Their older brothers were already been through Buds, were team guys out in the West Coast, and they told us specifically, you guys need to do overhead work. You need to have strong shoulders. You need to get dumbbells in your hands, barbells in your hands. You need to be doing presses. You need to be doing push presses. You need to bench, which was totally against the norm. Most people that we came across, recruiters, it was, you don't want to bench. Your shoulders are going to get jacked up. You're going to hurt yourself, and you're going to get too heavy. You're going to get too big. I'm glad that I did those things. It was a saving grace. When I got under the log, I was only about 185 pounds going into Buds. I was pretty thin to begin with. But graduating boot camp, I was 152 pounds. So in that time from, I want to say, end of October of that year, going through the winter, I was putting a lot of work. I was doing my calisthenics in the morning, going for beach runs, going for swims, but I was also hitting the weights at night 3 to 4 days a week. And I'm really glad I did it. A lot of us were really glad we did it. Now, I'm going to, before going any further, I do want to say, just because you do some of these things and you're training appropriately for the job that you're looking to do, isn't a guarantee that you're going to pass. At the end of the day, I don't care, and the instructors don't care, whatever school you're going to, how much of a physical specimen you are. If you don't have it mentally and you don't have the qualities, the personality traits and the qualities, the character that they're looking for, either A, you're going to wash out, or B, they're going to make sure that you wash out, or you're not going to be able to hack it up to standard. And I'm talking about things that are just outside the realm of what you can be trained in the gym, anywhere from accountability to honesty, integrity. These are the things that these instructors are looking for because they're going to be a part of their community in the long term. More than likely, they're looking for quality people for a specific type of job. They know how to sniff you out. So me sitting here on the screen and telling you, hey, you need to do presses and you need to do this and you need to do that, it's great, but you still need to have the mental aptitude. So this is in no way a guarantee that you're going to make it through any kind of training. It still comes down to whether you're going to stay put and finish the grit or not. One of the other things, before I get any further, is that the swimming. Okay, if your training does require swimming, you have to get in a pool. I don't know how many times I've been asked, well, hey, I don't have access to a pool. What's the best way to simulate that so that when I get to, I don't know, marine recon training or anything else, or search and rescue swimming, what's the best way to prepare myself? There is no substitute. You have to get in the pool. Not only do you have to get in the pool, but you have to be very comfortable with it. That's just something else that they look for, is people who are uncomfortable in the water. If you're freaking out, gasping for air, taking water in, you're gone. You're not going to last. They zero in on that really fast. There is no substitute for spending time in the pool or in the ocean or in the lake. You need to find some water somewhere. If that's not a viable option, you need to think about maybe moving, or think about spending the commute time, the hour to 2 hours, whatever it be, if you live out in the middle of nowhere, to get to a public pool somewhere, pay for access if you need to, get at least one workout a week with the pool, because there is no substitute. You can go run, you can get on the rower, you can kayak, you can do all those things. You can sit there and hold your breath on your couch. It's not going to prepare you for what's going to go on in the pool. So first and foremost, if you have water evolutions in your training, there's no substitute. You really need to get in the pool. So like I said before, training for a PFT versus training for your actual school and job, the two very different things. Don't train to be good at taking a test. It's a very one-dimensional athlete. And I would recommend that type of training to anyone. Body weight exercises are great, but they're not the end-all be-all. Same reason strength training isn't the end-all be-all as far as weights go. You need to do both, okay? You need to do both. Some common injuries. I talked about shoulder dislocations, labral tears, things like that. Lots of stress fractures in the legs from guys overdoing it, running 50, 60 miles a week, preparing for school. They didn't end up running that much, and by the time they got there, they're already beat up from overuse. Back herniations. It happens. You pick up a heavy log for repetitions upon repetitions. They're really not there. The logs aren't there to get you stronger. The logs are there to tear you down physically and mentally, and to weed out the people that aren't mentally fit to be there. So that being said, you preparing yourself and putting your best foot forward to help prevent that kind of an injury. We'd hate to see someone go all the way there, get 4 weeks into training, they're in the middle of Hell Week, and then they blow out their back. That's terrible. You should be doing some kind of deadlifts and back squats. You should be doing core strengthening exercises besides just body weight exercises. You need to learn to brace. You need to learn to lift properly. Doing body weight exercises is not going to get you ready for that. It's not going to strengthen your back the way that a heavy dead is. And I'm not talking about doing max singles. Really, there's no reason to really hit a max single and deadlift unless you're competing in powerlifting or weightlifting competitively. Doing a 5x5, a simple 5x5 workout once to twice a week, leading up into the time you leave for your school is more than enough. It's great. It's going to pay dividends down the road when you are older, when you're trying to maintain your physical fitness throughout your career, your 20, 30 years on the force or in the military or with a fire department. Having a strong back, and if any firefighters are watching, you'll confirm this. You have to have a strong back to be running around with that kid on your back and that tank on your back. Especially if you're hitting a lot of fire calls. If you're living in a city or working for a metropolitan force, whether it's police department or fire department, you're moving constantly. You're always on the go. You're always having that kid on your back. You need to have a strong back. It also helps. Let's say you have a nasty fall. You fall down a flight of stairs. Having a strong back is going to keep you from possibly breaking your back. The stronger your body is, the more durable it is, the less likely they're going to be life-debilitating injuries. So deadlifts, squats, presses, they're all good things for all of you. In moderation, like I said, you don't have to hit heavy singles. they're almost pointless. What you need to be doing is building general strength by doing a 5x5 or a 3x10 or 5x10, building up some muscle tissue, building up some general strength, and learning some basic movement patterns to help keep yourself from getting injured down the road. Like I talked about earlier, strengths and weaknesses. If you are a big muscle-bound 230-pound guy, ex-Division III running back, and you're trying to go into one of these schools, then by all means, take it easy. Maybe step away from the barbell for a little while. You're obviously strong enough already. It's time to think about your running, your swimming, your flexibility. Not enough gets talked about as far as mobility training for tactical athletes. A lot of what happens on the job or in training that ends up leading to injury could be avoided if the candidates worked on their mobility on a regular basis. If you have really tight shoulders, can't get into the overhead very good, okay, to begin with, you can't even get a good strong lockout, think about putting a log over your head and having to put your hands together. That's a really confined position for a lot of people. Unless you're really flexible, your body's going to look for the path of least resistance to be able to get it into that overhead position. So let's say I can't physically get there because my arms just won't lock out because my lats are too big or I have really tight pecs, whatever, what have you. What's generally going to happen, because I can't get to this base of support here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to arch my back. I'm going to bow at the belly. You can't see here. Let's see if I can do this here. Instead of this nice stacked position, I'm going to end up here. And all that pressure is going to go to my low back. And you might be able to last there for a couple days, couple weeks doing those exercises, but eventually something's going to happen. That's a lot of pressure on the low spine. That's not advisable. So what you need to do, fix these guys. Spend some time on your range of motion. It's going to sound silly to a lot of guys, but yoga is a great one. There's a lot of mobility resources out there, whether it's Mobility WOD, Kelly Starrett, there's ROM WOD. They're great services, but honestly, it's just as easy to go down to your local yoga studio. And you may feel a little silly going down there and, getting your yoga mat out, but it's going to pay dividends. And the people that are possibly laughing at you, you're going to be laughing when they're laid up, they can't work or they can't finish training, and you're fine because you've taken the time, you've taken the investment in your body to improve your range of motion so that you don't end up getting injured like they do. You'll look down here. So anybody have any questions so far, feel free to shoot at me an email. You can reach me at fluidfitnesssolutions@gmail.com, or you can just message me on here on the gym's Facebook. One thing I did not talk about yet, hypothermia is a big one. Some people are more prone to it than others. It's kind of hard to predict. Once you start hyping out on a regular basis, you're kind of more prone to it. There was a whole group of guys in my basic training outfit that were taking cold showers. I mean, ice cold showers, thinking that was going to protect them or desensitize them from exposure. It's just not the case. If anything, it makes it worse, and you just look silly because you're taking a cold shower for no reason. Now, contrast showers are great for people because the hot-cold contrast, like you would in a contrast tub, it has effects on your recovery time between workouts. But as far as mitigating your exposure to ice-cold temperatures, it has little to no effect as far as I know, and anything I've heard is it's just dumb, so just don't do it. So hypothermia, you're either going to get it or you're not. Let's see here. One more thing. Strongman movements. A lot of emphasis is placed on barbells, dumbbells, calisthenics. Not enough is placed on strongman movements. There has been a movement toward a lot of tactical athlete programs out there, like Softlete. They use sandbags. They'll pick up odd objects. This is great for one. Generally in your job, you're not going to be picking up evenly displaced objects like a barbell. Typically, you're going to be picking up dead weight like a person. It could be an animal. If you're a firefighter, you're picking up a dog out of someone's house and you're going down a ladder escape with it. It could be anything. Could be just a heavy kit. It could be a log. Could be a boat. Like I said, there's all kinds of things that are going to come into play in some of these jobs that you can't foresee. Picking up heavy things that don't necessarily do what we want them to do is great training, is great real-life training, whether it be heavy Atlas stone carries. Farmer's carries is another big one, especially if you're talking about being able to get over an obstacle course. If you don't have the grip strength, rope work. I don't know how many times we got to the obstacle course and people couldn't get up the rope. Not so much because they weren't strong enough in the upper body or they were too heavy. Because generally we don't have people showing up to that training that are too heavy. Well, what the issue is, they don't have the grip strength, because if you look at a climbing rope, you're talking about more diameter like this. With a barbell, men's barbell is between 28 to 30 millimeters at the thickest. So you're talking about that. So you're training all the time, gripping heavy objects like, say, a deadlift or a squat or press with that grip. Rope climb, that big. You can see the problem there. There's a big disparity. You need to be getting on the rope. Like I said, there's no substitute for getting in the pole. There's no substitute for getting on a rope. Whether you have availability of a rope climb, if you have a high enough ceiling or not, that's a different story. If you don't have that clearance of ceiling, or if you don't have a tree to hang it from, then you need to find a heavy sled or a simple thing like a sandbag or a bunch of rocks or a bucket of rocks, and pull that thing from a seated or standing position and just work your muscles. Work your grip, work pulling with your lats. It's going to be better than nothing, okay? Because generally most obstacle courses they go through in some of these jobs, they're going to require some kind of rope work. That's all I have for you guys today. Like I said, if you have anything for me, you want to shoot me an email, message. I have trained numerous candidates to get through some of these programs. Some have been successful, some haven't. Some have gone on to try other programs that they ultimately end up passing. They have great, fun, rewarding careers. That's one thing I want to leave you with is, if it doesn't work out, whichever you're trying to do, whether it's state police, firefighters, a lifeguard, you're going to the Coast Guard, something doesn't work out, it's not the end-all be-all. There's always another route to go. Plenty of the guys that I know that didn't make it through training ended up having great careers. They typically didn't follow the normal path. One of them ended up driving unmanned submersibles for an oil rig. Another guy, he ended up gunner's mate on a riverboat. He worked around riverboats, riverine force with the Navy when they brought that back out. Trying to think some of the other ones. I mean, one's a microbiologist down in Texas. He works for the CDC. He has a great job. He works with a lot of interesting things, touches some specimens that I wouldn't want to be anywhere near. But again, just because something doesn't work out in your early teens or your late teens, early 20s, or even your 30s, doesn't mean it's the end of the road there. There's plenty of opportunities elsewhere. If you're a driven person and you're looking to do something special like that, you've already shown some capability there as far as your mental tenacity. You have some kind of drive and ambition. Just because you don't make it through one thing doesn't mean that something else later down the road isn't going to work out for you. So that's what I'll leave you there. You guys have a good night. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Once again, if you want to shoot me an email or message, I'm all ears and I'm an open book. Have a good night.